Hey, real quick, everybody, want to give a shout to our friends over at betonline.ag. I know the NFL's over, the Super Bowl's done. We got Major League Baseball, NHL, March Madness coming around the corner, which to me is the greatest postseason sporting event of all time and what I like to wager on the most. So head over to betonline.ag as soon as you can. Tell them Jboy sent you, whether it's prop bets, whether it's parlays, whether you want to go straight up, or whether you're into teasers, pleasers, whatever you like to do. They have it over there, and the online casino is open 24 hours a day. There's always something going down at betonline.ag. So check our friends out over there and tell them Jboy sent you.
You are listening to the Jboy Show, your number one source for the SEC.
My goal was to run through his soul and grab his heart when I run through his soul.
Kurt, Nate, Coach Staff, those are memories.
I think we've established ourselves as, I think, the premier conference in college football.
Now, the SEC is better at the top. It's better in the middle.
The Southeastern Conference remains the premier conference.
Now takes the snap. Looking for the receiver. He's got Hutson. Kirkland. Touchdown, Auburn!
When you think about it, it's always been the SEC and everybody else trying to catch it.
I think this is probably the best league from a competitive venue standpoint.
They have the most capable teams. You just look at those programs, the way they recruit, how they invest.
Snap to Burrow. 3 steps. Fires. Back corner of the end zone. Over the shoulder catch. Did he hold on? He did. Justin Jefferson. Touchdown, Tigers.
And now, your host, Jboy.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us again this morning, whether you're watching, listening, however, we really appreciate you. As usual, trying to bring you guys the best content, the most knowledgeable guests, and why not bring in a guy that played the position at the highest level, played at the SEC, obviously at an esteemed school like Georgia that's had a ton of success. You can find him on 680 The Fan all the time now, Bucket Hut. You can also find him as an SEC Network football analyst, calls games, and does a really good job. Mr. Hutson Mason. Hutson, what's up, man?
Yeah, Jake, thanks for having me, man. If I saw correctly, did you have some guy named Danny Werfel on the podcast yesterday?
You may have heard about him a few times.
Oh, and you decided to have me follow up Danny Werfel? I mean, you set the bar pretty low for me, man.
Hutson, I watched you coming in ball when your number was called, so I know regardless of who you're following, you're going to do your thing. But man, I'm excited to have you. I'm going to get to Georgia, but I want to start with Auburn first. A guy that you played under, Mike Bobo. I want to ask you, because there's been, he's had a great career. He's very well known in the SEC. Obviously has his footprint in recruiting, knows the South really well. But can you take our audience kind of in the quarterback meeting room, on the practice field? What kind of a coach is Mike Bobo? How's his coaching style? And really, how did you feel about the way he approached you guys in that room?
Yeah, I mean, Coach Bobo is obviously, when it comes to experience in the conference, I think to an extent that matters. Sometimes it's a little bit overblown, but I think, for Coach Harsin, never of coaching in this conference and recruiting really and geographically in this area, I think the way he pieced together the staff was very smart and very wise. And, 2 of those guys on the offensive side of the ball, obviously Mike Bobo, but Will Friend was my O-line coach at Georgia as well. So, very familiar with schematically what they're going to do and how they're going to coach. I mean, I don't sugarcoat it. Coach Bobo is a old school guy when it comes to coaching. I mean, he knows how to push you and, but he also knows how to get the most out of you. And I think his track record with quarterbacks really proves that in this conference. And it's interesting to see what he did a little bit at South Carolina and how that's going to gel and mold with Bo Nix at Auburn. Just purely based on the fact that I don't think Coach Bobo has had the athletic style of quarterback that he's about to have with Bo Nix, really dating back to probably DJ Shockley. And I mean, that was a while ago. Football has changed tremendously schematically since 2005.
It has. That's a great point.
Murray was athletic, but I think Bo Nix, and just in my opinion, is a step above athleticism of that caliber as well. So if you want to kind of see maybe a glimpse, and it's a small sample size of what maybe the offense could look like, run game quarterback wise. Go watch a couple of the last games of South Carolina offensively last year. They started a true freshman quarterback. And I called the South Carolina Missouri game in Columbia toward the end of the year. And it was when they were transitioning at the quarterback position and they were bringing in this true freshman quarterback, man. And he's very athletic, very fast, raw passer. But you started to see kind of the evolvement and the evolution of how Bobo was taking a very athletic quarterback and doing some things that he traditionally has never done because he's just strictly had a pocket passer.
No, it's a great point. It actually segues to my next question. I know you keep an eye on guys. Obviously, you're knowledgeable when it comes to schematically what the quarterback's seeing, really where the reads are, where the progressions are, and what he's setting up. Can you talk a little bit more about the evolution of Mike Bobo's offense that you've seen up into this point? And really, do you think it's going to be a true blend, Hutson, of Mike Bobo's offense? We know he wants to run gap scheme. The play action game's big. Being able to go under center and in the gun is something I think that's going to slow down the pass rush a little bit for Bo Nix, maybe keep him in that pocket. But can you talk about the evolution now? He goes out to Colorado State and they put up some pretty big passing numbers. Now that he has a guy like Bo Nix, how do you think that offense will continue to evolve? Are we going to see some more quarterback run game? Are we going to see maybe a little zone read thrown in there, maybe some RPOs thrown in there? Kind of where do you think it's going to be? Because I do think there's going to be a little touch of what Brian Harsin does, running the stretch, running outside zone, and blending that with what Mike Bobo wants to do, really from that gap scheme run game.
Yeah, that's the $1 million question. And I think the thing that I'm most interested to see in the spring for Auburn is Brian Harsin's offense combined with Mike Bobo's and how it kind of gels. And specifically how Bobo decides to call plays, knowing that the guy he answers to and his boss is an offensive minded guy, right?
Yes.
I mean, so this isn't, at South Carolina, it was a different dynamic because Will Muschamp just left Bobo alone and said, hey, do whatever you want to do. When you work for an offensive coach and you're an offensive play caller, it's a little bit different because you're answering to really what that coach wants to do and kind of his belief in what the system's going to be about. That's the most interesting thing to me because Bobo traditionally has been, and you're right, I mean, even at Colorado State, look, he ended up getting fired there, but for anybody that knows what happened there, he didn't get fired because they couldn't score points. They were putting 40 burgers up on everybody.
They led the conference in passing one year.
Yeah. They got fired because they were also giving up 40 and 50 burgers every week. So Bobo has a rich history and a rich track record of scoring points. It's a little different and it's a little bit more traditional than what we're used to seeing. I don't think, like if you look at what they did at South Carolina last year, late in the season, they were dealing with a roster that just quite frankly was not SEC caliber. And so he went to a lot more old school, what we did at Georgia in 2013, 2014. There was a fullback in the game for anybody that doesn't know what a fullback is. I saw fullback with Bobo. I saw 3-step drop. I remember turning on the Ole Miss tape. And in the first 10 plays, I saw a fullback in the game and I saw a 3-step drop. And I'm like, my gosh, does anybody know what this is anymore? But I think Auburn fans may look at that and go, oh my gosh, like how's that going to fit Bo Nix? I wouldn't worry about that too much. I think Bobo was forced to have to go back to some of those things because they didn't really have any receivers outside of Shi Smith. Their best player was their running back at South Carolina last year. So he is going to have a different quarterback, no doubt about it, that he's had in a really long time. I think where Bo Nix is going to benefit the most is mechanically and quick game passing. One of the things that I always thought was a knock of Gus's offense was the quick game principles, the quick game scheme was just kind of non-existent. And while there were really good things and hard things to defend in Coach Malzahn's offense, the hardest being, you had to always account for the quarterback's legs. I thought the one big element that was always missing in the maturation process of Bo that maybe he took a step back in last year compared to his first year was just there were really never any layups in the passing game, in the quick passing game. And so, Chip Lindsey was my offensive he was my head coach in high school. And so I was very kind of familiar when Chip was at Auburn, what they were doing schematically, what he wanted to do, and kind of the headbutting that was going on with, offensive coordinator and Gus. And so not to regress by any means, but, I just think that when Bobo comes in and he is going to start from the ground zero with Bo, and it's going to be all about his footwork, it's going to be all about his mechanics. I can't speak specifically on if he was getting that with Gus, but from a 40,000 bird's eye perspective as an outsider watching SEC football week in and week out and just watching offensive football for Auburn, that to me were the two things that were missing the most for Bo Nix and in that offense specifically with Gus.
Yeah, and it's a great point, Hutson, because, you played the position. You understand that, every throw can't be a deep throw. Every throw, somebody's not going to be wide open. It's nice every now and then to be able to run a slant and get 5 to get into second 5. It's nice to be able to run a hitch and get into second 6 to just give you some breathing room, especially early to get the quarterback going, especially early in the season. And I think that's something at the end of the day that Auburn tried to do a little bit, but not nearly enough. I think you're spot on with that. And we're going to move on from Auburn, but I got one more question. You bring up Will Friend, and there's no surprise. This is, I'm not, knocking this one out of the park when I say that Auburn's offensive line has struggled. That's been a big reason. We talked about they hadn't signed a high school offensive tackle since 2017. They weren't able to run the ball effectively. And in Gus Malzahn's system, the passing game isn't intricate enough to throw your way out of a game. You have to be able to run the ball, whether that's setting up to play action, whether it's making that defensive end, be able to hold on that zone read so your guys can climb. But when you look at Will Friend inheriting what he's inheriting, can you just tell me, as a guy that wasn't in the O-line room, but again, you depended on those guys more than anything to protect you, how good of an offensive line coach is Will Friend schematically, and how good of a recruiter is he?
Well, I think all you got to do is look at what he did at Tennessee in terms of recruiting in just a couple years. Look, it clearly didn't end in Knoxville how he wanted it to, but what you can't deny is you look at year one when he took over and when he got there, and where they were 2-3 years later from a depth and recruiting standpoint. They've got some talent on offensive line. They've got guys that are going to be playing on Sundays, and as soon as next year in the NFL. So I think it's going to take a year or two. He's going to have to go beat the Georgias in recruiting, the Alabamas in recruiting for these offensive linemen. But I do believe there's enough of them out there where he can kind of replenish the offensive line. And I agree with you. I mean, I think it got to the point last year where Bo Nix wasn't trusting his protection. He was seeing ghosts, and some of that is probably on Bo, but I think a lot of it too was on the protection as well. And I think sometimes we overplay the impact of just a singular offensive line coach and what he means. I think one of the more underdeveloped, under-talked about elements of an O-line coach is who the marriage of the O-line coach and the play caller. And I think what makes the dynamic really, really special for Bobo and Friend is they've worked together. They're best friends. They ride to work together. I mean, we used to always make fun of, Bobo and Will Friend as players because they were boyfriend and girlfriend, man. I mean, they were interlocked, interconnected at the hip. They would be, everywhere you go, you saw Bobo and Friend. Their families vacation together. They go everywhere together. So that dynamic of having your O-line guy and your play caller being very synonymous together in scheme and relationship is so important.
Yes, it is. That's a great point. And so you're telling me that they went to the garage and did karate and put on the night vision goggles just like in Step Brothers?
Sometimes I wondered if they had wives or they were, no, honestly, they spend more time together than they do with their own wives. And that becomes that's obviously a part of the dynamic of coaching college football. But Bobo, you look at South Carolina last year. Bobo worked with an offensive line coach that I don't think he's ever worked with before. So, I think that's so important. Will Friend and him worked together at Colorado State. They were together at Georgia. There is a long track record. I mean, you want to be able as a play caller in the middle of a game, just say, hey, Friend, we're getting, double edge pressure off this certain run game look that we're getting, you want to be able to adjust on the fly. And sometimes you don't have time within a game to describe everything out. You need to be able to talk that same lingo and with your communication and your verbiage and your offensive scheme. And him and Will are on the same page, and they have been for many, many years.
Well, the biggest hurdle for most guys and coaches when they're new is the terminology, just like you brought in, being able to understand that, because I really want our audience to understand it, and it's a great point, and we really like to go on the sidelines and take our audience there, how quick that communication does have to happen, how quick important decisions have to be made. And when the defense is on the field, there has to be an open line of communication. If you're in the box, if you're Coach Bobo out there talking to Coach Friend, going back and forth saying, hey, we need to make sure we tell the right side of the offense line this. They're spiking all the time. We got to be able to adjust, whether it's slide, whether it's big on big, however you want to do it. So it's a fantastic point, Mason. And I want to move to Georgia, because I think Georgia this next year, and if I feel like we always say it, but this year, and it's not just looking at what Georgia has coming back, because that's what everybody will look at and say, well, now they got JT Daniels, a quarterback that can spread it out. They're bringing all these guys back on defense. But you take a look around the league in the SEC, a lot of teams are losing quarterbacks, including Alabama, Texas A&M, which I actually think it may help Texas A&M, as crazy as that sounds. Florida's losing a bunch. This next year for Georgia, I think they have a chance to go in and be the top dog from an experience and talent standpoint, not just talent, because we all know the 900-pound gorilla that Nick Saban's built over there, the Death Star. But going into this year, and I want to ask you if you think Kirby's going to do something that he has not done and name a starter in the spring, because we all know who it's going to be. How do you look at Georgia going forward this year? And I really want to dig into this, Hutson, because I think there's some areas that are important.
Yeah. So, how do I look at Georgia? I agree with you. You look at the landscape of the East. There's going to be, maybe it's Florida again, and Emory Jones just performs way better than there's always a quarterback and a team that overachieves or just
Missouri, maybe with Basilak.
Yeah. Last year it was Florida, 2 years ago, it was the historic run that LSU was on. But on paper, and this seems redundant every year, but it is different this year, because the most important thing for Georgia is they're bringing back their quarterback, and simultaneously they're bringing back their top two pass catchers, which they haven't done. Plus play caller, let me throw that in there, Todd Monken. All of that mixed together, they haven't had that since 2012. And oh, by the way, in 2012, when they brought, Malcolm Mitchell, Tavares King, and Aaron Murray back, they went to the SEC championship game, 4,000 yards passing, 37 touchdowns. So I think that part of the experience coming back offensively at the key most important positions of what we've seen, what it takes to win a national championship anymore. And that kind of segues me into the most important thing for Georgia to hit expectations in 2021 is just Kirby relinquishing control. We saw at the end of the season last year when, JT stepped in, he was a life support. He was a breath of fresh air. He was a jolt of just, modern day college football to the Georgia offense. And, despite why it took that long to get to JT, the good thing is that he's got a couple more years if he wants to be in Athens. And so with a spring football this year and Todd Monken coming back and all the running backs coming back, I just think Georgia is set up this year where, and despite the questions in the secondary where they had mass exodus, offensively, this is the best and most potent, I believe, offense that Kirby will have had and has had in 5 years that he's been, 6 years that he's been in Athens. The expectations are high, but the expectations are always high. But when you look at the competition this year in the SEC East, obviously he's going through a teardown and a rebuild. NCAA sanctions probably. South Carolina is nothing right now. They've got a ways to go to rebuild. Florida's just the only team, and Florida's got question marks in terms of with as many weapons plus a quarterback spot, question marks on defense with Todd Grantham coming off a really struggling year. If Georgia, the bar is the SEC, the floor, is the SEC championship game for Georgia this year. And they need to get over the hump, and that hump has been Alabama, and obviously they open up with Clemson and Charlotte.
Yeah, that's going to be an absolute war. You thank goodness you return a quarterback in that game. And the biggest thing for JT is obviously staying healthy throughout the whole year, because again, he's a guy that can spin it. He's already developed a rapport with those receivers that you look around. And something I talked with Paul Feinbaum on, Hutson, and I think you'll agree with me here. I feel like Kirby Smart offensively is on the Nick Saban evolution train, that all of a sudden you realize you're not going to beat people 24-3 and 17-7, and you have to score points, even if you're defensive minded and say, well, if we're good on defense and we don't turn the ball over and we're good on special teams, we're going to win. You kind of see now that, obviously JT has the ability to expand the field and spread the field. And you brought it up, opening up that offense, relinquishing control. Could we have something this year where Georgia is actually more balanced passing to run instead of it being the run to open the pass, taking shots on first down, getting in trips, getting in tray, running different combinations, not being afraid to kind of get a little exotic. And I'm not talking about anything crazy, but do you think Kirby is, because you watch Nick Saban and their offensive mindset philosophy has changed a ton, especially with what Lane Kiffin brought. Do you kind of see that same pattern with Kirby? Is he kind of figuring out the same way that at the end of the day, regardless of how good we are on defense, how talented we are up front, we have to score points to beat Alabama, to beat the top teams when it comes down to it?
Yeah, I would say no. I haven't seen that change from him, and I think that's been the biggest knock from Kirby so far. Really, the only knock has been he recruits tremendously well. I mean, in fact, through a 4 or 5 year span, Kirby's got an average. If you're averaging out the classes, he's a little bit better than Alabama has been. Not by much, but just a little bit better. So Georgia's getting the same players that Alabama's getting, but it's scheme. Georgia's been, what was it? They went through Chaney and Coley and 3 offensive coordinators in 3 years. Yeah. And so the knock on Kirby has been, he is still a little bit in that antiquated old school. And I say old school, I'm talking just 6, 7, 8 years ago when you used to be able to win a national championship, like you just said, run the ball, play really good defense. That's not the recipe to winning national championships anymore. You have to be able to score at least 40 points a game, given some of the rules in college football and how it's changed. It's all favored offensive football. And until Kirby is willing to kind of look himself in the mirror and go, I'm going to get out of the way. Okay. I brought in Todd Monken. I've got the quarterback this year. I've got the talent. And there's a little bit of stubbornness there. I think there's a little bit of, I don't think it's an inability to change. I think it's just a little bit of a stubborn mindset that we can win this way. And look, Georgia doesn't have to all of a sudden have a Heisman Trophy winner at the quarterback position to get over the Alabama hump or win a national championship. I think the biggest element that's been missing the past couple of years has just been the explosive plays in the passing game. You can be balanced. People think balance is 50-50.
Never is.
It's people think balance is like, I got to throw for 200 and I got to run for 200.
Yeah.
It's, to me, it's the explosive passes that have been missing in Georgia's offense that has been missing the past couple of years. So, and that's the element, I think, when you throw in JT Daniels and George Pickens and Kearis Jackson, and then you can start to run the ball. I think that's where Georgia becomes really dangerous. But remember, Nick made that change once he realized that, when he was petitioning for the spread offense, and remember, he was like, this isn't good for college football. And he realized it was kind of the mantra of like, if you can't beat them, join them.
Yes.
Right. And then Hugh Freeze beat him like 2 out of 3 years. And he had this like revelation of like, oh my gosh, like if I don't change, then I'm going to be behind, and I'm going to be behind the trends. And maybe, Hugh Freeze and some of those teams are going to beat me more. And he made that. Nobody had a bigger influence and impact on Nick Saban changing his offensive identity than Hugh Freeze. Kirby's not there yet.
Yeah. No, it's I agree with you. And I wonder if we may see that and if he will get over that hump. But I think it is a great point. And want to take 1 second to mention our sponsors at eBay. Make sure you go over to ebay.com/sneakers. Check them out. They give you an authenticity guarantee, whether it's old shoes, new shoes. Like I said, you want Jordans, whatever. They've got everything there. Go check them out. They'll send you, like I said, a tag that guarantees the authenticity on the box, the logo, everything. They have a whole team of professional authenticators, so you're going to get what you want, when you want, from a place that you can trust. So make sure you head over to ebay.com/sneakers. Check them out and tell them Jboy sent you. But Hutson, great stuff. We're here with former Georgia quarterback Hutson Mason. You also catch him on 680 The Fan. He's the SEC football analyst for the SEC Network, and ESPN does a fantastic job. And Hutson, looking around the league now, we talked a little bit about South Carolina. You look at the Josh Heupel hire at Tennessee, which was kind of a stopgap. I want to talk about Texas A&M for a second, because I think there's a sneaky narrative here. You may agree, you may not. I think Kellen Mond, while they won a lot of games and he was solid, I think Jimbo wants to open it up more than what they did last year. I kind of akin them to an anaconda or a python that really tried to just squeeze it out of you in the fourth quarter. Their offensive line was so dominant. Jimbo's smart enough to realize, hey, I'm going to adjust to my personnel. We're great at this. I don't have to put the ball in Kellen Mond's hand to throw us to victories all the time. Do you think maybe getting a guy, and they have to have a guy that comes in and do it. Now, I'm not, jumping to conclusions, whatever you want to say, but if they have a guy that Jimbo Fisher feels can air it out more, do you think, and we're speaking of Georgia deciding to try and be more explosive in the passing game, that Texas A&M will kind of shift to more what Jimbo did at Florida State when he had the weapons to do it, which to me makes A&M scarier with the way they're recruiting, the resources they have, and the momentum that they've collected, especially after being left out of the playoff, because they're pissed in College Station, Hutson.
Yeah, it feels like Texas A&M is the biggest sleeping giant in all of college football. With the resources and the money, and being in the state of Texas, to me, it's like you look at anybody else and across the entirety of college football, a team that could just erupt and be a college football playoff type team for the next several years. It's Texas A&M. So far with Jimbo there, they haven't been able to, Kellen Mond, really good quarterback, and probably was underappreciated to an extent, but was never able to really win the big game. The Florida game this year was huge for, Texas A&M, and I think that was their first AP top 5 win in the Jimbo era, if I'm not mistaken.
You're correct.
Yeah. So, and it did feel like, man, once they finally got over that hump, they took off the rest of the year. And with LSU being a huge question mark now, and where are they going? A lot of pressure on Ed Ogeron this year. They feel like an Auburn coaching change. That number 2 spot in the SEC West behind Alabama is wide open for grabs. Jimbo's offense is interesting because you go back to the Florida State days, and that's been 6-7 years now, but it's all about hitting on the quarterback. And and I go back to this, like with Georgia, if you don't have the elite quarterback in college football anymore, playing at an elite level, married with the elite play caller, you can miss on everything else. You can have an average defense. You can give up 38 points per game, 35. Look at Alabama this year. Their offense the first 6-7 weeks of college football was anemic. But when you've got an offense that is explosive and it scores points and it averages 40 points or more a game, it kind of masks and camouflages the other flaws on the team. And so play callers, which is Jimbo, which is good because he's going to be the play caller as long as he's there. You don't have to worry about an OC, getting hot and then leaving, and then you're looking for a new offense coordinator the next year. But then it's just the quarterback. And for whatever reason, there was a little bit of disconnect, it seemed, with Jimbo and Kellen Mond. And I don't know if it was more of a relationship thing. I don't know if it just took Kellen a little bit of time to pick up on the new system. So to me, they're the one team and the one coach that you look around. This is just like, okay, they were close last year, right? I thought I could make a strong case for them getting in, but with Alabama being there, man, they could be really good, but you almost have to be perfect to get into the college football playoff, because you sit there with one loss at the end of the year and you haven't played in the SEC championship game, you're not getting in.
Yeah, no, it's a great point. And I'm big for expanding it to 8. I'm going on a crusade here, probably in a month, and I have some bullet points listed in how to increase the parity in recruiting, because to me that's what this comes down to, and the recruiting, especially up front. And how important that is. But I want to have a little story time here, Hutson, before I let you go, man, because I know playing as long as you did at the level you did, our audience loves some stories, loves a little war stories a little bit. Can you give one to our audience? It can be funny, maybe a big play or something, just some story that you look back on now and say, man, that was fantastic.
Wow. I was a part of the prayer at Jordan Hare. This is an Auburn podcast. Man. This is the Auburn podcast.
No, we're all SEC, so you can branch it out. You can branch it out.
All inclusive, huh? Yeah, man. I'm trying to think of a good Auburn or just a good SEC story in general. I've got a ton. It's just a matter of what I'm allowed to tell you. We can keep it PG-13. We can keep it PG-13. I know I'm putting you on the spot, brother. Yeah, well, I'm just trying to think of specifically. Narrow it down for me. Specific.
Let's go. Give me this
game or a play or
let's go.
Let's go.
Give me your best throw. The best throw that you made in college. The one throw I asked Andy Werfel this. and it was a ball to Chris Doring in the back of the end zone against South Carolina. Give me Hutson Mason's best throw he ever made at Georgia. It could be a slant. Doesn't matter that you just absolutely squeezed in through a donut hole. Just let us know.
No, that one's actually pretty easy for me. So it was the first throw of my career. I was a true freshman. I played 2010. We opened up first game of the year in San Francisco against Louisiana Lafayette. I believe blowout. I come in the third quarter and first play touchdown pass. And
good start,
which I believe is a NCAA record. I have to go back and look at that. But first collegiate throw was a touchdown pass. And the funny part about it was it was a double post concept. So you got the slot receiver running a post. He's trying to attract the safety. And you got
come on down, baby. Come on down.
Yeah, over the top. And I actually threw it to the wrong guy, which was the funny part about it. And it was to Logan Gray at receiver, who the irony of that was he played quarterback and then transferred to receiver or moved positions that year, that offseason. And so I throw a touchdown pass, first play, man, I'm coming off the sideline. I am so just jacked. And Coach Rick brings me over. He's like, man, congratulations. And he goes, what coverage was it? And I'm like, oh, it was cover 4. I read the safety drove on the under post. I threw it over top. And he was like, no, it wasn't, but good throw. And I go back and the next day I look at the tape and he was exactly right. What happened was they brought a corner blitz and I should have thrown, technically by my rules, I should have thrown a side adjustment to the boundary, to the boundary receiver, and the touchdown pass would have never happened. I missed it. And luckily, the corner never got there in time. I got it off, but it led to a touchdown pass and I guess, again, I'll have to go check that. Maybe it's in the NCAA record books, but that was the funny part is technically by rules, it should have never happened.
That's hilarious. And it's amazing how many times stuff like that happens that the fans audience will never know because it just looks perfect. And I appreciate you sharing that with us, Hutson, man. That's fantastic, kind of taking us back. But I do want to ask before we go, man, this is great. I got to get you back on. Tell everybody where they can find you on social media. I know they can find you on 680 The Fan, obviously the SEC Network, especially during football season when the games are being played. But where can they find you on social media? Because you put out great content. You had me geeking the other day when the dude put it on the green and you tweeted one of us ... because that was so true in the PGA Tour.
Yeah. You can find me on social media, man. I'm at HMason14. Probably, up for debate. Need to take down the 14 number. It's probably about time. Maybe just go with at HMason14. That's still in deliberation, but at HMason14, you can listen to my show at 680 The Fan here in Atlanta. Me and former Georgia quarterback Buck Blue every day, 1 to 3. And appreciate you having me on, Jake. I was listening to your podcast the other day with Mike Lutzenkirk, and Philip was a really good friend of mine. And so I was listening to that the other night. It's a tremendous story, and I know he appreciates you giving them the platform to kind of share what they're all about, and what they're trying to do with saving lives with distracted driving and everything like that. So.
Well, man, I appreciate that. And that message is way more important, like I said, than any touchdown pass. And I just hope that everybody listening to that really got something out of it. It'll take that 43 seconds and make the right decision and learn from that. But I really appreciate that, Hutson. We'll get back on, man. I'm sure now that I'm in Atlanta, I'll see you around sometime.
Okay.
And we'll hang out, man. But I appreciate you, and we'll talk soon.
See you, man.
I appreciate you guys as well. It's been another edition of the Jboy Show. Jboy's going, gone. The Jboy Show is produced by David Cohn, technical director Dave Hammock, creative director David Culbertson, audio engineer Feyzan, production assistant Kyle Orr, and our executive producers Jake Crain, Vince Thompson, and of course we film at Melt Sports in Atlanta, GA. So come check us out.